Welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Kermit Whitfield, a member of CMC's board and Chief Strategy Officer for United Way of Central Ohio. It's great to see you all here today. Today's CMC Forum, Ohio's Transportation Future, is sponsored by Ice Miller and HNTB, represented here by many friends and associates. Won't you please help me thank them? Now, to introduce our forum, please welcome Principal at Ice Miller, former U.S. Congressperson, municipal court judge, and my fellow member of CMC Board, Deb Pryce.
Thank you, Kermit. Thank you, Kermit. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. Ice Miller is really pleased to support the Columbus Metropolitan Club as we engage the community in important public conversation each and every week right here. Join us. Now, some of you may know our special guest today from his silver-throated music reporting, and others may know him as co-host of Jazz Sundays on WCBE Radio, and if you don't, you ought to tune in 3 to 6 every Sunday. It's a wonderful show, and Jack, we ought to have you back again to discuss music, but that's not our subject today. We're here to get to know him in light of his new job. Let me start by saying, since the early 1800s, when the National Road and the Ohio Erie Canals became Ohio's first major infrastructure investments, transportation has been a fundamental driver of Ohio's economy and a key component to equality for all of our citizens. Investment in infrastructure and access to affordable mobility are critical towards a successful and prosperous future for Ohio and everywhere. No one is more aware of this awesome task at this very critical time than Ohio's Director of Transportation. And today we're honored to welcome the new Director of the Ohio Department of Transportation, a member of the Columbus Metropolitan Club himself for more than a decade. Please welcome Director Jack Marchbanks. Our host for today's conversation, journalist at WCMH and NBC4, fellow board member also, Colleen Marshall. Colleen, the stage is yours.
Thank you, everyone. And I do think we should start off with a little bit about your background, because she mentioned the jazz music, and you certainly have the voice to be a radio personality, but you also have multiple degrees. So just give us a quick, for those of you who don't know you, a quick little wrap-up of your bio.
Okay, all right.
Hear that voice?
I got it from my dad, you know. I had nothing to do with it. But grew up in the Dayton area. Was valedictorian of my high school, got a scholarship because my parents were working class, got a scholarship to the University of Dayton. From there, I went to Clark Atlanta University and got a master's degree in local government planning. Got a job offer from the Legislative Service Commission. That brought me, I didn't even know what that was. So I came to Columbus, and that started my career in government service, working as a researcher for the Legislative Service Commission. My very first assignment was transportation and urban affairs. So from there, I also got a degree from Xavier University in Cincinnati at MBA. And after that, I started to work for the Ohio Transportation in 1991, August 1st, 1991. Started to work up in the Delaware District Office, District 6, the Central Ohio region. And from there, I fell in love with transportation. I thought I was going to have a career in banking and finance, but I really loved what transportation did. And even though I took sabbatical to the private sector and to academia, I had to come back to the Ohio Department of Transportation. That's why I'm here now.
Well, you know, as we look at Ohio, Deb touched on the Erie Canal, and we are a crossroads state. So, as you look at the state of Ohio, we are also a state that has different regions with very diverse problems. From Appalachia to the growth that we're facing here, what is your biggest overall challenge as you try to wrap your arms around with your mission of being in service, really, to the entire state?
Well, what we have to do is strike a fair and equitable distribution of limited resources. We have really so much that goes on in southeastern Ohio that demands immediate attention. The past couple of years, we've had several weather-related emergencies that have created a huge drain on our resources when it comes to taking care of slips, slides, roadways sliding into rivers. So that is a big issue. Of course, with our metropolitan areas, what we're facing is congestion, particularly in Columbus, the fastest growing city in the state and perhaps the Midwest. So congestion is the issue there. And again, what we're looking at is a situation where we have interstates that were routed into the hearts of the central business district. I guess they thought that was a good plan back in the 50s, but because these interstates are in the central business district, we have to rebuild them in the central business districts, which makes that task complicated and extremely expensive. And then we have the issue of our agricultural society and what we have to do to support them and other communities. So it's always interesting, it's always challenging. If you're into problem solving, we have a job for you at the Ohio Department of Transportation because we have lots of problems, but we really work hard, Colleen, at solving them.
Well, you mentioned the interstates really coming right through the heart of the city.
Yes.
Did they make big mistakes back then? I mean, are you dealing with a legacy of mistakes?
I'm not going to throw
And
that
who
on
are you
my
going to point the finger in?
I'm not going
Might
to
be
throw
in the
that on my
audience
past
right now.
administrators. No, they really did a great job. Eisenhower, of course, as you know, and as most of the members of this audience knows, got his inspiration for the interstate system from his time in Germany, leading our troops and seeing the Autobahn. The original plan for interstates, I'm a historian, you know, I have my doctorate in history, American history. The original plan was to have the interstates be sort of away from the central business districts, and you would have arterials or grand boulevards routing you in and out. But the city fathers of all across the nation decided, well, we think we want these interstates to run into our central business districts. We'll create opportunity, jobs. But again, that was a decision that was made in the 50s, and we're living with the legacy of it. I wouldn't call it mistakes, it's a legacy.
Well, you have now managed to pass, or the governor, your administration has managed to pass a gas tax.
Yes.
When Governor DeWine first started talking about this tax increase, and everybody was saying, wait, here's a Republican governor, and one of his first jobs is to raise taxes. It was a little surprising.
He was surprised
But
when we told him.
And you say when you told him,
Yes.
when the governor came out, he said, we're in a crisis here. We don't have enough money to maintain what we've got in this state.
Yes.
What did you hand him? What was your message to him about the path forward?
Well, when I interviewed with Governor DeWine, I told him that we had a revenue problem, and he still appointed me. But what we pointed out to him that we were basically dealing with a structural deficit where the cost of maintaining our huge inventory of surface transportation system assets, our ability to maintain those in good condition was really tremendously at risk. What we're talking about here, when you think about Ohio, as Colleen was talking about, we are a crossroads state. We're crisscrossed with interstates, which is our primary responsibility and our most expensive asset to maintain. So we convinced him, showed him the numbers. Our financial team got in front of the governor's office. I see Michael Hall here from the governor's office, his policy chief. Michael did not like me when he first saw me because I brought a problem to him and the team. But to the credit of the governor, once we documented the actual structural deficit, he said, we have to address this problem. There's no other way to get at it other than increase the stream of revenues. And there was one way to do it that we knew was reliable, and that was to increase the motor vehicle fuel tax, which is, in essence, a user fee. Everybody who drives the highway is using on it. They're creating the deterioration that has to be ultimately repaired. You can argue whether or not interstates and our fascination with cars is the best place for America to be at this point in time, but it's the reality. And the reality is that it's an asset we have to maintain.
You know, he talked, when he came out publicly talking about this tax, he said 17 or 18 cents a gallon, or we can't even maintain what we have now. He said there were threats to projects like the 70-71 split unless he got that amount of money. You did not get that amount of money. So what does that mean going forward?
Well, what it means going forward is that we gave the governor a 10-year forward look, which necessitated an 18 cents in revenue increase in the motor vehicle fuel tax. Part of what happened during the process was that the governor and the leadership of the Ohio General Assembly agreed to a shorter horizon, that shorter horizon being 4 to 5 years. When you put together the 10.5 cents plus the diesel increase, which we did not have in our original proposal, the increase in diesel fuel, and the additional registration fees that people who own electric vehicles and hybrids will be paying starting January 1st, 2020. When you cobble together all those revenue streams, when you put them into one flow, it's about 14.2 cents. So that's not far from what we originally asked for. And we are going to be working at the Ohio Department of Transportation to find internal savings. We're looking at best practices nationwide in terms of coming up with better construction materials to increase the useful life of our interstates, of our highways, of our bridges. And we think that we can give this people of Ohio, the citizens who use this system every day, all day, a good product, a good asset that they can rely on in a safe manner until about 5 years from now.
Well, surrounding states have a much higher gas tax. Pennsylvania, my home state, is much higher than the state of Ohio. But a number of states also have an automatic, almost like a cost of living increase built into the gas tax so that it goes up automatically and it is more realistic. Ohio hadn't had a gas tax increase, I don't think, in 2 decades. So
Almost.
Do you think the legislature needs to do that? Have they dropped the ball on being forward thinking and realizing? What I'm trying to get you to do is to criticize the legislature.
Are there any members of Mr. Householder or Obhoff's staff here? No, the General Assembly, you have the executive branch and you have the legislative branch. I'm a student of government. The General Assembly chose to strip the index proposal, which we did have in our original plan before them. They chose to strip that. So we will have to deal with the consequences of that. Again, we're looking at a 4 to 5 year horizon. We're thankful for what the General Assembly did. Face it, folks, you're looking at a majority Republican, majority conservative General Assembly. They did something that they did not want to do, but they saw the need and the fact that not just the Ohio Department of Transportation and our team, but Fix Our Roads, the County Engineers Association, the Ohio Municipal League, the Township Association, and local citizens all said, hey, the need is real. We know you hate raising taxes, but this is a user fee, and this is an investment in Ohio. What people fail to realize is that, yes, you're going to see orange barrels, yes, you're going to see a lot of construction over the next few years, but these are people who are living in Ohio, paying taxes in Ohio, buying vehicles to pay more gas tax, buying vehicles in Ohio, and raising families. So we think it is an economic boon to Ohio, as well as a wise investment in our most valuable tangible asset here in Ohio, which is our transportation system.
You know, there are a few areas of state government, I think, that people think they know as much about running as transportation. Everybody can tell you when they drive down and they see how long have they been working on this road? Why? And they'll tell you where the potholes are and that they haven't been maintained properly. They'll tell you when and what you should be doing and why this road is wrong. What kind of feedback and how do you deal with the fact that we all think we can do your job?
Well, we have very thick skin, and we realize that everybody believes they own the system, which they do. So they have a right to speak up. It doesn't bother me when people complain. Many times these criticisms are valid, and we always want to get better. We don't want to tune out the citizens. We have our communications chief here. I don't know, Erica Hawkins is here. So we hear it all day, every day. In fact, we get trolled on our website a lot.
I bet.
But we don't mind
I've been
that.
on there. No,
we don't mind because a lot of that criticism ends up being constructive. So again, if you're sensitive or your feelings are hurt easily, you don't really need to work for ODOT. But if you really want to get something accomplished that benefits people every day, you do want to work for ODOT.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what's going on right here in Central Ohio. Yes. First of all, the 70-71 split. I have been at the Channel 4 for 35 years. I think they were talking about the problems with the 70-71 split 35 years ago. It's just now in the process that we see changes and work being done. Mm-hmm. When are we going to say, wow, the 70-71 split is finished? And will it be time to repave it then?
Well, I think, you know, we will be memories, Colleen, you and I, by the time that's finished. Hopefully fond memories. But no, the 70-71 split, we have people in this room who were there at the very beginning when we authorized the major investment study. And I kid you not, we authorized a major investment study that launched a series of projects that we're going to be working on for the next 10 years still on September 11th, 2001. You started that year. You said you started and something happened on September 11th with you.
I went to New York on September 11th.
Oh, yeah.
I had just started law school, and
yes, that's right.
I had to call my professors and say, I'm going to be out of town.
For a while.
Yeah.
But we authorized that project on that date, and never forget, we were in the lower level auditorium. I think Bob Campbell was working for ODOT at that time, and the state troopers pulled us out and said, hey, we need to talk to you, Jack Marchbanks, because I was a district deputy director at the time, and part of what we had to do was to mobilize concrete portable median barrier because Flight 93 was flying over Ohio at the time. So that project, I pointed out to that milestone. That was, gosh, 18 years ago, coming September. These projects, as I mentioned, take a long time, and because you have just daunting issues here in Central Ohio. You have what we call a system interchange. You have two interstates, you know, merging and crisscrossing right in the heart of downtown Columbus with a river and a historic neighborhood, or historic neighborhoods all about. So that's going to take a while. We have made some great advances. One of the things that we've done that I think has really helped Central Ohio was the Interbelt I-670. That has helped, and that will be actually our detour as we move through this last section. What people will see at the end of this most recent undertaking, the ones over by Nationwide Children's Hospital, you'll finally see the east-west connectors, the Mound-Fulton connectors, which will be the main routes in and out of Columbus. That's the ultimate vision. The main stumbling block after we get through with the east side is, of course, crossing the river, 315 and 71. So these are generational projects. We'll be handing them off to the next generation of civil engineers. But these are projects that we have phased in a way that each part we complete has, you know, utility. And again, we're hoping for a large federal transportation bill and budget that will help us advance these remaining sections of the I-70-71 split so we can see them, Colleen, before we're in rest homes.
Well, I'm not planning that anytime soon. You know, you mentioned the 70-71 split. We've certainly in Columbus seen how highways can isolate neighborhoods, sure, how it can change culture, yeah, because a highway can move through and suddenly separate, yeah, entire regions from the heart of the economic center. Yeah. And that's a responsibility that you must think of whenever you're planning massive changes where you go in and use your eminent domain powers to say, we're changing your lives.
Yes, that is a daunting responsibility, and it's power we don't use lightly, and we try to use it judiciously. I actually am the child of someone who was displaced by the first interstate system. The home I lived in the Dayton area, 185 Albany Street, was displaced by an off-ramp to 75. So my father actually greeted the highwaymen at the door when I was about 4 years old, and he said, we're going to have to move. And the other aspect of that is that when we were talking about how we've routed interstates into the cities, you routed them into the cities through the poorest, mostly African American and community of color neighborhoods. So one thing that the DeWine administration and I particularly am going to be vigilant about is make sure we don't make those mistakes again, that we don't disadvantage these vulnerable communities again. You know, that's a pretty awful legacy of the interstate system, that here in Columbus and Cleveland and every major city, these highways went through, they routed them through relatively powerless communities politically. So with projects such as the Long Street Cultural Wall, those projects where we're trying to knit back. We can't repair the damage that was done, but we can make sure that we don't do that damage again. We can make some mitigations, and again, the Long Street Cultural Bridge connects, here in Columbus, connects the Near East Side to the Central Business District. It reflects the culture of the King Lincoln District, and it has been seen by many around the nation as DOT and local folks, including Anthony Fox and the Obama administration, were pointed to it as an example of a way to heal the wounds, to close the gashes that were made between central business districts and these communities of color.
You know, Columbus is now projected to be, that 2050 study came out just this week saying, you know, we'll have 3 million people by 2050. First of all, where are all these people going to go? And how does that impact your planning strategies? Because right now, this is a pretty big city that has a pretty lousy mass transit system. Other than CODA, we don't have light rail. We don't have the kinds of infrastructure support that you would think a city that's going to nearly double in size in a few decades needs.
Points well taken. The Ohio Department of Transportation's main mission is the easy movement of people and goods from place to place, from city to city. So we see our primary responsibility as moving people over long distances, and it will take leadership from cities, from regions, to put together these regional transit plans. ODOT is not the leader. You know, we lead a lot, but it will be the local communities, the regional communities, that have to put in place these transit systems that'll help manage mobility as Columbus grows and grows and the population becomes even denser and people flood onto the highways. Back to the Future, I found out when I was working at District 6, there was this system called the interurban, where you actually had an electric rail line that went from city to city. And that system was trashed and forgotten about. Local governments, you have, I think, a very able partner in the Metropolitan, the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. I think you have a leader in CODA. These are key leaders that I think the Central Ohio community can coalesce around to devise a plan. ODOT will help, but it's up to the local regions, in my opinion, to put together these transit systems, these fixed rail systems, if you wish, that will make Central Ohio a world-class city as we move into the second half of the century.
Part of that 2050 study also projected these, what they're calling corridors,
yes,
that would grow out of the city and would become, you know, they talked about walking communities that would be built along these corridors and that then would connect to mass transit to move people in a more efficient and quicker way.
Yes.
Is that something you could see ODOT having a role in? Because if we're going to have these corridors moving out, there's going to have to be paths made for corridors, that this isn't something that, you know, can just spring up on their own. And certainly, don't you think there's a requirement for really significant planning for this to work properly?
Well, of course, I agree with the points you've made in regards to planning. And ODOT will participate as these corridors interface with, you know, of course, our interstate and U.S. highway system. But some of these corridors are going to be on streets, such as you already have the Cleveland Avenue to Polaris Africa Road corridor. And I read that same study. What you're looking at here are corridors that are really built around job centers that are that lie beyond the outer belt in many cases. So I've seen in other cities such as Portland and St. Louis where you can use bus rapid transit in lieu of fixed rail. Perhaps bus rapid transit along these growth corridors is the interim step before you move into some type of fixed rail scenario.
You know, Ohio has, as we talked about earlier, a lot of regions. And I'm a child of Appalachia in southwestern Pennsylvania. And my dad used to say, when you're giving someone directions, just tell them you can't get here from there. And you can't get here from there when you don't have highway systems. And that has been one of the problems for the southeastern quadrant of this state. It's hilly.
Yes.
It's isolated. There aren't a lot of job opportunities. They don't have broadband, and you can't get there. Is that something that your department is looking at as a mission to try to help open up opportunities for that part of the state?
Yes, we are, the DeWine administration and the Department of Transportation is all in on helping Appalachia, not become the left behind region of Ohio. What we're looking at already is that we've put together the Portsmouth bypass, and that we believe is a very important new corridor that runs from Portsmouth southeast toward West Virginia. And we also have, of course, improved US 33 with the Nelsonville bypass. And 23 remains the one corridor between Columbus and Portsmouth that we have to address. But those corridors are forefront of the DeWine administration's agenda. We are also looking at using our highway rights-of-way to allow broadband to get to these underserved communities. So we are exploring ideas, and we want Appalachia to prosper because it's a part of Ohio, and that all of Ohio needs to do well.
You touched on where you were on 9/11.
Yes.
And certainly that date and that event changed the way businesses operate and manage their security.
Yes.
We have security at a television station that we never dreamed of having back before 9/11. Yes. And it also must change the way you have to plan to keep the highways secure. How much of terrorist activity goes into the planning that you have to think about when you're managing a state that is a crossroads for the nation?
Well, Colleen, we work closely with the Ohio Department of Public Safety and Director Thomas Stickrath. We have undergone security exercises because you're looking at the interstates being major routes for people in and out of hot zones in case of a dirty bomb. We've run those scenarios. So our forces, our highway maintenance forces and our team, we're poised to help wherever we can, and we are looking at restarting those those emergency protocols in regards to how we would help evacuate or protect populations using our surface transportation system. The other aspect of what we're looking at is security. Security in regards to our IT. There's a lot of intelligent transportation system technology that is hackable, and we do not want foreign powers, hostile parties to be able to hack into our system. So we are very, very invested in making sure that this smart technology that we're bringing online here in Central Ohio, which is very exciting, that it doesn't end up being a tool that harms or allows Ohioans to be killed.
You talked about us being the crossroads too, and I know a lot of the people who use the miles, the users of our highways, are truckers coming
Yes.
from other states. How are you managing or promoting Ohio as the place to drive through?
Well, not so much as the place to drive through, but the place to start your logistics business. Central Ohio, we believe, is at an inflection point. We, in the 80s and 90s, far-sighted people saw that this could be a logistics center. And now we're looking at this being a hotbed for testing smart technologies that help people remain safe as they drive our roadways, so that they don't harm themselves, that mitigate against distracted driving. So we are very excited about all the assets that are coming into place, just like in the 80s and 90s and going into the early 2000s, that we got all the Rickenbacker intermodal, Heartland Corridor, we cleared rail crossings for double stack, all these things, some of the things Congresswoman Pryce was involved with when we were working on the Heartland Corridor, that poised Central Ohio to prosper. for the next few decades. Now we're at another inflection point where we actually happen to have most of the smart technology assets right here in Central Ohio with Smart Columbus, with the US 33 Smart Mobility Corridor, with Smart Marysville, and a huge investment in the Transportation Research Center right up there at East Liberty, Ohio. What you're looking at is that they're building sort of like this Truman neighborhood out there where they'll be able to test smart technologies to make sure that you are comfortable when you're allowing your vehicle to drive the car.
And I want to remind everybody in just a few minutes, if you want to start lining up, we will be taking some audience questions. I'm sure you have some questions for the director. So we're going to ask you to not give a speech, just ask a question, because
we hear speeches all the time on our email and on our voicemail.
But before I start that, I want to give you the opportunity to tell everyone, you have taken on a major task for this state, one of the departments that really does have an impact. You touch daily what people, how their lives are lived. You know, getting to and from work,
yes,
going to the store. You know, we rely so heavily on having a good and efficient transportation system. As you take over this job and move forward, and you've been with the department for years,
yes,
but now you're in charge. So what do you want them to know about what your personal ideals are for your role as the Director of Transportation?
Colleen, I want to let everyone know that I want to be known as leaving in place a department that is responsive, that takes the concerns and criticisms of Ohioans seriously, and that leaves in place a safer system, a system that employs technology to allow people to not only move easily from place to place, but to move safely from place to place. Also, I would love for the Transportation Department to become the employer of choice. We have lots of new exciting jobs coming on stream in the smart technology realm. So we're looking at having Ohio attract the young, bright minds that Detroit did when the auto industry was first getting up and moving. We're looking at being that place for IT engineers, electrical engineers, anybody involved with smart technology and smart mobility coming to Ohio, because that's the place to be.
What would be the most surprising thing that people would learn about your department and the job that it does?
They would be surprised that we touch so many school kids. We have Paint a Plow. We have young people who are very interested in what we do. You know, big trucks and moving dirt and stuff fascinates little kids. So we really are excited about moving into the schools, and particularly the middle schools, and interesting a lot of people, particularly underserved communities and underrepresented populations, and getting them interested in the transportation career. I found out about it 28 years ago. I want other people to find out about it.
Thank you. And we are now going to take some audience questions. I see a number of people lining up. So tell us your name and ask your question.
Hello, Rob Moore, Scioto Analysis, a public policy analysis firm here in Columbus. Thank you, Dr. Marchbanks, for coming and speaking. This is fantastic. You mentioned integrating broadband and some of the construction projects that are going to be going on, installation of new broadband. And I know a lot of states and municipalities have adopted dig once policies, where contractors or the state need to notify local broadband providers that they're going to be digging, so that they can just come and drop a line rather than having to come and dig up after the digging has already happened. I wanted to see if ODOT has a dig once policy or some other sort of policy that's there to ensure that broadband providers can be coordinating with that construction, all this new construction that's going to happen with the new gas tax in place.
Thank you for that question. Yes, we basically work through our district offices, our 12 regional offices. Our construction engineers, our district construction engineers coordinate that when we're building new projects, when we're digging up rights of way, that we minimize disruption, and that you really only dig once. We have subsurface utility companies that we work with and have on contract to make sure that we identify all utilities buried out there in our construction zones before we start.
Thank you for that. Hi.
Hi, Colleen.
Hey, Stu.
Jack, thank you. First, thank you for keeping jazz alive in Columbus. I do appreciate it. I'm a regular listener. My question, though, is during the ODOT budget debates in the legislature, the 2015 statewide public transit needs study that ODOT itself did back in 2015 recommended increases in transit funding of up to $185 a year for each biennium. What my question is why didn't ODOT fight harder for greater levels of transit funding than it did? As I recall, the original recommendation was $7 million, which would have brought it up to 30. We wound up with 70 out of general revenue funds. So I want to know why it wasn't fought harder to go for more and better funding within the ODOT budget.
Thank you, Stu. In regard to that, I think you're referencing a study where ODOT recommended that $50 million be its share of that recommended amount for transit, but it wasn't recommended all out of ODOT's funds. But in that same study, I can document that for you. We were recommending $50 million, and we're prepared to go that far in the budget. The Ohio General Assembly chose, in its wisdom, to go to $70 million a year for this upcoming biennium. That was their decision. Our focus was on our system, which was in disrepair, and that we convinced the governor, and we think rightly so, that the majority of our interest should be in maintaining that system. Frankly, transit systems are primarily the responsibility of local governments, in my opinion, and we have a role to play, but we're not the primary player. That's just my personal philosophy.
Hi. Could you give us your question, your name, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Jason Warner. I'm the Manager of Government Affairs at Greater Ohio Policy Center. And keeping in the same theme of public transportation, you've just reiterated that you don't see ODOT as primary responsibility being in public transit, but you did mention the fact that we have regional systems that are able to do this coordination. Do you see ODOT, though, playing a role in assisting with that regionalism? I mean, what we basically have right now, we have 62 transit agencies across the state that are having to operate independently. Do you see ODOT playing a role in trying to assist with the coordination of those services in a more regional approach?
Yes, I do see that as a key benefit that we can provide, because we have a statewide vision, and we have a transit department under our planning group headed by Chuck Dyer, and part of his responsibility is to create that coordination, create that standardization wherever we can. So be happy to talk to you and point you in Chuck Dyer's direction.
Hi, good afternoon. Thea Walsh. I'm the Transportation and Infrastructure Development Director with the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, also the Chairwoman for Clean Fuels Ohio. First, regular attendee, first-time questioner, Jack, and wanted to ask you about safety.
Yes.
We have 211 people who lose their lives on Central Ohio roadways every year, and so we have an influx of funding. What are we going to do about safety?
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. You always are so subdued. No, just kidding.
I try.
But no, Thea Walsh is a great partner for ODOT here in Central Ohio, and I just wanted to say that because she's doing some great things. We are focused on safety in the DeWine administration. The governor, within I think a day, I think Michael Hall can attest to this, called me up and said, what safety projects are we going to start working on now that we have this additional funding? So we are working with the MPOs, we are working with the cities to identify additional hotspots. We have an identified top 150 that we're working on right now. And again, with all this, sizzle around smart technology and connected vehicles, I see the primary benefit of smart technology is providing more safety when we get in our cars, protecting us from ourselves when it comes to distracted driving, protecting us from others. Really some very exciting things on the horizon with that. So we're going to be working with the MPOs and their safety engineers to make sure that we stay right up to the moment. and preventing tragic losses of life like the one we had this morning out in Muskingum County, where off-duty sheriff's deputy and two parents of several children were killed in a head-on collision. If you can imagine the technology, Colleen, where you had a vehicle that could stop you from going left of center. That would save so many lives. So that is the top priority aside from moving forward with our maintenance projects and those major pinch points. So safety is in the vanguard of what we're going to be doing over the next 3.5 years.
Awesome. Thank you for making that a priority.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, good afternoon, Director. I'm Sam Spoffworth, and I run a nonprofit in Ohio called Clean Fuels Ohio.
What was that again?
Called Clean Fuels Ohio.
Oh, okay.
So we focus on a variety of energy and technologies that we see as being advanced alternatives to diesel and gasoline. We work also a lot with the U.S. Department of Energy, and there has been some analysis coming there saying that given all these disruptive transportation developments, mobility services, and the like, we might see as much as a 200% increase in energy use on a per capita basis from the transportation sector. And we also might see up to a 60% reduction, but it'll take some careful planning and work. I'm just wondering from your standpoint, I know energy isn't really the main mission of ODOT, but certainly there's a lot of energy impacts. I'm wondering if you're open and if your department's open to a planning process that would begin to take a look at energy impacts of transportation, energy utilization, and ways through a variety of mobility services, transit, natural gas vehicles, electric vehicles, et cetera, that there might be a way of aiming towards that reduction in energy consumption rather than that large increase.
To answer your question, we are interested in that. Part of what our mission is as we move through maintaining the system and to reduce the carbon impact of what we do. We have in Ohio, we have an Office of Environmental Services. We're always interested in figuring out ways to reduce, pollution in our water. We have a big issue with, stormwater runoff with the chemicals we use in our snow removal. So always excited to hear new ideas. So be happy to talk to you about how we could work together.
Could you see the state transitioning to using vehicles that are electric or hybrid, or, we think of these big massive trucks that you have to use to clear the roads and so forth. Those take a lot of energy. Yes,
they do, and we are already using CNG, and I think there's been some discussion of moving to electric once the electric has, the electric vehicles have the power to move some of our big dumps and heavy equipment, so that's something that's on our to-do list.
Hi, could you give us your name, please?
Hi, Director. My name is Sumitra Jagannath. I'm the president of Z Digital. We are a software development firm in developing smart mobility software right here in Columbus, Ohio. My question is, some of us, including myself, would love to take public transit, but the barrier is from where I live in Blacklick to get to the closest bus stop. It's about 5 miles away. So are there any initiatives that ODOT is looking at for first mile, last mile connectivity to help encourage use of public transportation?
Well, this is a point of interest for us, especially when it comes to our Drive Ohio division with first mile, last mile initiatives. Some of the things that we're doing that might just look like they're cute or novelties are really the beginning of services, autonomous shuttle services that could help people get to that mass transit and to get home. We have also had lots of interest from people with disabilities, been contacted by vision impaired groups who really are looking forward to this smart technology, this autonomous mobility that will allow people to actually enjoy the privileges of being able to move around. So we are looking at first, last mile options with our Drive Ohio initiative. And these are things that are in their early days, but we expect to have a program where we can assist those local governments and implementing those first mile, last mile solutions.
Can you explain to people what first mile, last mile is?
What you're looking at here, we have, with our transportation system, we have gaps, and as Ms. Walsh and all the people at Morpsey know, we have gaps in how people get to a bus line, get to, and who may not have the financial wherewithal or the credit card to have Uber or Lyft get them there. So what we're looking at are technologies that will, and mobility services that will get them to mass transit locations. These are really important when you're talking about job locations where you might be able to get out to Rickenbacker, but you might have to walk a mile to get to your actual, warehouse. So these walks, they're unsafe. So what we want to do is step in and play our part in doing what we can with those kinds of short distance solutions.
Well, before we let you go, was there anything else we need to, Andy has a question. Do you have another question? No. No, okay, thank you.
Hi, Andy Campbell. Thanks for being here, Jack and Colleen. Just curious, you hadn't mentioned really waterways or airports, and I wonder if those come under the purview of the Ohio Department of Transportation, if you had any thoughts in regards to transportation on the Ohio River or the Port of Toledo, those sorts of.
Well, ODOT has some responsibility for ports and rivers. Of course, we deal with locks and dams there on the Ohio River, and when it comes to the ports along Lake Erie, we do play a role. We assist when it comes to infrastructure, and we have divisions that handle that. And we also play a role with our aviation department, and I think we have about 176 public airports in Ohio, a lot of county and small airports. Those at our county, we assist in terms of tarmac and other infrastructure improvements. So we play a small role. I think the General Revenue Fund budget shows you how small a role. We really only have about less than $20 million that we spend annually when it comes to aviation, but we do have a minor role. But again, an auxiliary role and not a major one.
All right, thank you, Andy. And please join me in thanking Director Marchbanks for being so forthcoming today. Really good job.
I hope you enjoyed today's forum as much as I did. Let's thank our sponsors, Ice Miller and HNTB. And of course, our speakers, Jack Marchbanks and Colleen Marshall. And thanks to all of you. We'll see you here next week.